The U.S. Arab Radio Network is the largest Arab and Muslim radio network in America, broadcasting throughout the Midwest region Monday through Friday on WNZK AM 690. U.S. Arab Radio features Arabic and English language programming on every topic, from health, food, and culture to government, politics, and legal issues. Listen live to U.S. Arab Radio in Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, and Windsor, Canada on WNZK AM 690. And in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia on WDMV 700 AM. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. So join us every day on the U.S. Arab Radio Network and check out our website at www.arabradio.us.
I'm Aftandilian. Join me the last Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be exploring key issues and events in the Middle East and the U.S. live on America's Voice of the Arab. Tune in to WNZK 690 AM and watch live on the Facebook page of U.S. Arab Radio.
Good day, everybody. After striking Iran's nuclear sites, President Trump mediated a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. But questions persist. Will the ceasefire hold? Does Israel want a regime change? Did Iran remove hundreds of kilograms of highly enriched uranium to a new secret location? And there are doubts also about a possible diplomatic resolution. Will Iran go back to negotiate with the U.S.? Will it accept U.S. demand to dismantle its nuclear program? So many questions. So to help us answer these and other questions, we have two distinguished guests and experts. Professor Brad Roth of Wayne State University and Professor Gregory Aftandilian, who is a senior fellow with the Arab Center in Washington, D.C. Before we get started, just a program note. We are coming to you not just on radio, but also by video. If you go to the Facebook page of U.S. Arab Radio, you can see us in video. Now, my first question is for both guests, and let's start with Professor Brad, Professor Roth, and then Professor Aftandilian next. The same question. The question says, why is the U.S. opposed to the idea of a nuclear Iran when it turned a blind eye, in fact, a blind eye to the nukes in Pakistan and in Israel? Professor Brad.
Well, of course, the relationship between the United States and Iran ever since the revolution in 1979 has been extremely fraught. Iran has a reputation, whether earned or not, of being erratic in its international affairs and being unwilling, generally speaking, to abide by the kinds of strictures that are not only grounded in international law, but generally understood to guide the policies of significant powers. And so there is concern not only in the United States and not only in Israel, but also in the Arab world about what Iran is capable of in respect of nuclear weapons. On the other hand, I think this has to be seen through the lens of a certain kind of partisan politics. I may talk later about some of the partisan aspects that are driving all of this. But I think that, clearly there is a double standard. There's a sense that Israel needs to have a strategic monopoly of nuclear weapons in this particular region. And clearly the United States has now doubled down on the side of the Israelis in trying to impose this by force, in ways, of course, that are in violation of international law, as well as arguably United States domestic law, also in ways that we can discuss further.
Okay, Professor Aftandilian.
Well, I largely agree with what was just said. I think it really boils down to U.S. political relations with countries. And we also have to remember that the Iran nuclear program actually started under the Shah of Iran. And a lot of people don't remember that. And so even though there was a few problems in the nuclear relationship with the Shah's Iran, the United States generally supported Iran becoming a nuclear power. And so ever since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, as the previous guest said, we've had bad relations with Iran, and that is the reason for the hostility over their nuclear program. Obviously, with Israel and Pakistan, they've long been seen as U.S. allies, so the United States has turned a blind eye to their nuclear program. But also Iran has been known to hide stuff from the international community, the IAEA, and others. And so there's also this issue of trust, that even though Iran has declared some nuclear sites, there's always the fear that they have hidden sites, and they could possibly be pursuing weaponization of nuclear energy.
Are you saying that the Shah of Iran meant to have a military, to weaponize a peaceful program, or was it understood to be peaceful?
Well, again, there's controversy about that because the United States helped them develop a peaceful nuclear energy program under the Shah, but there was concern in the 1970s, before the Iranian Revolution, that the Shah may actually be wanting nuclear weapons. So actually, the United States held up some nuclear technology for several years, and that was eventually resolved shortly before the Iranian Revolution. But there was also concern at the time in the 70s that the Shah possibly wanted nuclear weapons.
Professor Roth, will Iran give in to the U.S. demands, or will it become more determined to have nuclear weapons as a deterrent? As we all know that for example, North Korea, nobody can really attack North Korea, not because it's not weak, but only because it does have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, the flip side of this, of course, is that Libya gave up its nuclear program, and look what happened to Gaddafi in response to that. So the difficulty is that if you don't succeed in these kinds of attacks, that you incentivize those who have the capacity to redouble their efforts to try to establish a nuclear deterrent. And just generally with the idea of preventive war, there was a wonderful line by the commentator Tom Nichols that if you're going to take a bite of that sandwich, you had better be prepared to swallow the whole thing. It's to try to make nuclear non-proliferation based on the threat and willingness to use all military power in order to accomplish it is to commit oneself in the long term, I think, to a very dangerous road.
Professor Aftandilian, do you think that Iran will become more determined to have nuclear weapons for that reason, that nobody will be able to attack it in the future?
Well, that is certainly the danger, because the Iranians may see the development of a nuclear weapon, which they haven't done so far, as a deterrent to any country trying to attack it. So that's always the possibility. On the other hand, they know if they go down that road, and the Israelis have good intelligence on Iran, that the Israelis would likely strike again. So they have to weigh these two options.
Professor Ross, give me a few examples why Iran is so antagonistic against the U.S., death to America and all that.
Well, I think a lot of it is just a matter of internal mobilization. It distracts from the failings of the regime to have this target for popular anger, and that's been the case going all the way back. The Iranian Revolution, of course, arose as a kind of heroic response to the Shah's repression. And the Shah was deeply connected to the United States, as has been pointed out, but also not simply in terms of the supply of nuclear energy or the kinds of resources for potential nuclear weapons. Iran was seen by the Nixon administration as the regional policeman of the United States, and so there was a kind of contracting out of U.S. security designs to that regime. And the United States saw itself as having a very significant interest in maintaining that regime in power, and became very much connected to the SAVAK, the security services of the Shah, which engaged in repression, and that therefore provided a basis for public anger against the United States, which you saw an enormous outpouring of in 1979, leading to the hostage crisis in 1979. And it just went on from there. But I think that the regime also simply sees this as tactically valuable, that people will remember what things were like when the United States was connected to the politics of Iran. And the unpopularity of the regime makes it convenient to try to displace the anger of the population in the direction of United States supposed interference and intervention.
Professor Aftandilian, what do you think about the controversial issue whether the U.S. bombs obliterated, I repeat, obliterated completely the nuclear site, the three nuclear sites in Iran?
Well, of course, this gets back to semantics. Trump obviously wanted to tell the American people that his decisive military action essentially ended the Iranian nuclear threat. Obviously, he was speaking way ahead of what the intelligence community probably is going to take weeks, if not months, to try to get their heads around how much damage there was, especially on the Fordow nuclear site. So this is, I think, typical Trump, where he wants to go before the American people and also maybe the world and just say, he's this decisive leader who accomplished a lot. But the fact remains is that we really don't know the extent of this damage. And my guess, it will be several months before we even have a good grip on how much of Iran's nuclear capability has been degraded from the U.S. attacks.
We're going to take a brief break. When we come back, I'm going to ask Professor Roth, what's the possibility of ending the Gaza war now that the war between Iran and Israel hopefully has ended? After the break.
With more than 30,000 successful in vitro fertilizations, IVF Michigan is now ranked as one of America's best fertility clinics according to Newsweek magazine. IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders in high-quality fertility care. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 9 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. A founding member, American board-certified Dr. Nicholas Shama, is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. He has performed over 20,000 successful IVF cases, and it's helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. When it's time to get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at one of America's best fertility clinics, call IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio toll-free at 855-952-9600. 855-952-9600.
A car accident can change your life in an instant. As a result of a car accident, you may become unemployed. As a result of a car accident, you may need a lot of medical treatment. People think that insurance companies are on their side. Why? Because they're giving them 1 or 2 benefits. Are they giving them all the benefits they deserve? How would one know unless you consult with an attorney? Call the law offices of Jumana Kiruz at 248-557-3645. 248-557-3645.
Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most, and make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493.
I'm Abdul Gawad. Join me the last Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be exploring key issues and events in the Middle East and the U.S. live on America's Voice of the Arab. Tune in to WNZK 690 a.m. and watch live on the Facebook page of U.S. Arab Radio.
Welcome back to our to Radio Baladi. We are discussing prospects for peace between Israel and Iran, and also related issue. And my question goes now to Professor Roth, and we're going to shift a little bit to Gaza. What's the possibility of ending the war in Gaza now that the war between Iran and Israel hopefully has ended?
It's very difficult to be optimistic about anything that goes on at this point, considering how long the siege of Gaza has persisted. And this, the distraction of the war against Iran doesn't really change any of the fundamentals about what's been going on there. I think one thing to note is that we tend to have discussions in the media in the United States about Israel being driven, as it were, by some kind of geostrategic vision, when typically Israeli policies, both with respect to Iran, I would argue, and with respect to Gaza, are driven largely by domestic political machination. The Netanyahu government is a coalition that depends on appeasing certain coalition partners of Netanyahu We saw with the Iran strike, what hasn't gotten a lot of attention is that Netanyahu was on the verge potentially of losing his coalition. That he needed to have the ultra-religious parties, Shas and UTJ, remain within his coalition. If they pulled the plug, he was going to face new elections where he was likely to lose. And so the Iran strike at this point, at minimum, was a window of opportunity that was closing on him because of the possibility of new elections. But more to the point, I think this was an opportunity to change the subject and bind his coalition partners to him. Similarly, with respect to Gaza, much of what is done there is to appease another part of his coalition, the very hard right parties that were elected under the banner called Religious Zionism in 2022. Those people represented then less than 11% of the vote in Israel, possibly less now, but they're pivotal players in keeping Netanyahu's government afloat. Those people do not want peace in any form in Gaza. They want to recolonize the Gaza Strip. And Netanyahu may not care one way or the other what the future is there, but in order to maintain his coalition in place, he needs to operate in such a way as to keep on board people who are constantly threatening to pull the plug on him. And of course, the stakes are very high for him because he's subject to criminal prosecution for corruption, and he needs to maintain executive power in order to try to derail the judicial process against himself.
Actually, my next question was going to be about the future of Mr. Netanyahu, but we will get back to that. Now, Professor Aftandilian, do you share the pessimism of Professor Roth about the current ceasefire? Do you think it will hold, the ceasefire now between Israel and Iran? You think it will hold?
Well, much depends on whether there are a resumption of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. Trump has said he wants those talks to resume, and there's been speculation that it could start as early as next week, though the Iranian foreign minister has kind of put cold water on that. So we really don't know what's going to happen. But as long as those talks continue, I think the ceasefire will hold. However, if those talks do not begin, or if those talks break down, you could see a resumption by the Israelis, I think, on other sites within Iran. And that really is kind of a danger that lies ahead, or potentially lies ahead.
Now, Professor Roth, you talked a little bit about the possible future of Mr. Netanyahu. And let me ask you about whether or not the war between Israel and Iran has strengthened, weakened, not just Mr. Netanyahu, but any other party to the conflict.
I think it has strengthened him temporarily, but I think the most important thing for him is that it has kicked the can down the road, and he is always playing for time. At the moment, public opinion polls would appear to show that he would be defeated in an upcoming election. What's interesting about that is that what he would be defeated by would be a coalition that would be in many ways almost as hard line on questions of Gaza and the Palestinians as the current government. Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, has been resuscitated as a political figure. He is now by far and away the most significant figure in the opposition coalition. eclipsing more moderate politicians like Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz. And so the likelihood is that if Netanyahu is replaced, is going to be replaced by a government that will pursue many of the same kinds of policies, both with respect to Iran and with respect to the Palestinians. There is a remarkable level of consensus, even among people who really despise each other for a lot of internal reasons, on the Iran question, and by Netanyahu changing the subject to Iran, he has postponed any day of reckoning politically and has improved, at least temporarily, his standing with the voters. I think that that's going to be ephemeral, but in the end, hard to see major policy changes coming out of these developments one way or the other.
Mr. Aftandilian, the Iran-Israel war was, as we have witnessed, a war of missiles and drones and technology. What should that tell us about future wars?
Well, over the past decade, of course, drones have become an important factor in wars, and we see that, of course, with the Russia-Ukraine war in particular, but we see that, of course, in this latest round between Israel and Iran. Obviously, there's technology to stop some of these attacks, but even then, I think with the Iron Dome and the Arrow system, I think about 10% of the Iranian missiles or drones were able to get through to Israel, and that caused some damage. So it's not 100% proof that you can develop anti-drone or anti-missile systems that would get all of the incoming missiles. But we see this as a new form of warfare that's probably going to continue. In other words, drones and then anti-drone technologies.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I will ask Professor Roth about the future of the Supreme Leader of Iran, Imam Khamenei, after the break.
Ziad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Dana, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziad.com. That's www.ziad.com. Ziad, quality products from our family to yours.
Every year in Michigan, approximately 3,000 people die of drug overdose. Today's drugs are more addictive and deadlier than ever before. Most street opioids tested contain a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. Drug overdoses are preventable. Keep naloxone on hand. Together, we can change the statistics. Learn how to save lives at michigan.gov/SUD. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
I'm Atif Abdel Gawad. Join me the last Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be exploring key issues and events in the Middle East and the U.S. live on America's Voice of the Arab. Tune in to WNZK 690 AM and watch live on the Facebook page of U.S. Arab Radio.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing the prospect for peace between Israel and Iran, together with related issues. And I would like to have both guests address the following question. And let's start with Professor Roth. You talked to us about the possible impact on the future of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, what is the possible impact of the war on the future of the supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei, or the regime in Iran?
Well, it's difficult for me to say, and it's beyond my expertise to talk about the internal politics of Iran, but just generically, one sees certain kinds of trends. This is an increasingly unpopular regime. It's been in power for 46 years. The kinds of appeals that can be made based upon a kind of history of resistance to imperialism, and the kinds of sources of fervor that existed at earlier periods are largely dissipated. And on the other hand, that gives rise to a much greater reliance on repression as a means of maintaining power. There's nothing quite like being humiliated in a foreign confrontation to undermine one's domestic support. People start to see you as being weak. That is definitely a detriment to your power just generally. But of course, we thought after the Gulf War, if you'll recall, in 1991, that Saddam Hussein would not be able to maintain power in circumstances of humiliating defeat. And of course, he was still in power 12 years later. So I think it's too optimistic for opponents of the regime to jump to the conclusion that this sort of jolt will lead to Khamenei's fall. Particularly because people who are opposed to the regime are not going to want to be seen as associated with the designs of foreign powers, whom I think nobody in Iran wants to be seen as connected to, particularly Israel. So I think that I wouldn't be gambling on regime change at any point in the near future, but I don't have a deep insight into the internal dynamics of Iranian politics.
Professor Aftandilian, the same question. What is the possible impact of the war on the future of the supreme leader, Khamenei?
Well, he's 86 years old, and once the bombing started by Israel, he went into hiding. And actually, he gave a lot of power to the Revolutionary Guards. Of course, many of the top leaders were also killed in the strikes by Israel. This regime is deeply unpopular, as Professor Roth said, but it seems to be holding together. I would look for any splits in the Revolutionary Guards to actually predict a possible regime change. But so far, we have not seen that. In other words, the Revolutionary Guards are still loyal to the supreme leader, and they, of course, are the main instrument of repression within Iran. We saw that a few years ago when the Iranian Kurdish young woman, Mahsa Amini, was brutally beaten to death by the so-called morality police. And that sparked all kinds of demonstrations in Iran, but those demonstrations were brutally repressed by the regime security apparatus. It's going to be very difficult to predict that this regime is going to fall. I should also say people have been predicting this fall of the regime ever since 1979, and it's held together for something like 46 years. But what we can say is that the popularity of this regime is vastly diminished from what it once was shortly after the Iranian Revolution.
Vastly diminished. Professor Roth, based on that, do you see or expect Iran altering, whether it's under Khamenei or the Supreme or the Revolutionary Guard or somebody else? Do you see Iran now altering its policies in the region? Specifically, I'm talking about the idea of exporting the revolution.
Well, I think that we are likely to see new ways of acting out, considering the fact that the conventional military forces of Iran are not going to be very effective in fighting back against either the United States or the Iranians, and the local allies of Iran also are much diminished, particularly Hezbollah, really decimated by Israel's recent attacks in Lebanon. And so I think what you're going to see is an effort to engage in various forms of surreptitious violence against targets around the world that are associated with the United States and Israel. There'd be a great incentive on the part of the Iranian leadership to demonstrate a certain kind of potency. And recall the kinds of things that have happened in the past when you think about the Lockerbie bombing, things that have occurred where countries in the position that Iran is in now have sought to strike back on the international stage. And so I would be quite concerned that not so much a matter of exporting revolution as retaliating through sort of surreptitious means, whether that be against American civilians abroad, against Israeli civilians abroad, particularly against Jewish institutions wherever they may be in the world. We saw that occur with Iranian sponsorship in Buenos Aires some decades ago. So I think the world is going to be a more dangerous place for a lot of different kinds of people as the Iranians contrive to find ways of renewing some demonstration of potency.
Does Iran, I'm still talking to Professor Roth, does Iran still have a considerable Jewish population?
Say again?
Does Iran still have Jews among its population?
Not significantly. And so the situation of the animosity of the regime generally, which is not so much limited to the state of Israel, but is often expressed in ways that give rise to agitation against Jews more broadly. Is something that's an aspect of the regime.
Professor Aftandilian, what is the impact of the war? And I'm talking here still about the Israel-Iran war on possible upcoming negotiations between Iran and the U.S. I mean, do you expect there will be such meetings or negotiations?
Well, as I said before, Trump certainly wants those negotiations to take place. The Iranian foreign minister has put cold water on that. But I think the two sides will indeed have negotiations. The main sticking point, however, is whether Iran can have a very small, highly enriched uranium program for domestic energy use. The countries that have signed the NPT certainly have that right. But in the wake of the Israeli-Iran war and then the U.S. strikes on Iran, I think Trump and his team will insist that Iran will have no ability to enrich uranium, and that could be a non-starter for the Iranians. So while I think negotiations will probably take place, maybe not this week, but perhaps the following week, I think there is this big bottleneck that's going to be very difficult to overcome.
Professor Roth, what is the scenario you expect to emerge if and when the U.S. and Iran hold negotiations?
It's very difficult for me to imagine what that's going to look like. We have a government in the United States at this point that's very erratic in its external relations, and very much sees, I think, external relations in instrumental domestic politics terms. And so, particularly with respect to the previous negotiation of the Obama administration, recall the so-called JCPOA, the Iran deal, as it was termed, the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, was very eager to repudiate that, largely because it was the accomplishment of his predecessor. And so he is going to, President Trump is going to certainly want to distinguish anything he does by way of negotiation with Iran very sharply from what has occurred in the past and the kind of deal that existed under Obama. And this is an administration, too, that loses interest very quickly in one initiative and moves on to another in another part of the world. And so it's really, I think, very difficult to get a sense of what level of seriousness will be applied to this and how those negotiations will likely proceed.
Professor Aftandilian, you work for the Arab Center in Washington, D.C., and I want to ask you about the position of Arab nations on the whole, generally, and tell me if I'm wrong. Arab states support Iran against Israel, but at the same time, there are Arab states who have been always nervous about Iran's behavior.
Well, I think there's a duality here where publicly the Arab states in general condemned the Israeli strikes on Iran, as well as the U.S. strikes on Iran. And, they want to show solidarity to a fellow Muslim state. But on the other hand, I think quietly, some of them, particularly in the Gulf states, were quite happy that the Iran nuclear program was set back. As I said earlier, nobody knows how far they were set back, but certainly they were set back by the Israeli and U.S. strikes. And even though there's been a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran over the past several years, probably the Saudis quietly were in support of these strikes because it still does not trust Iran over its nuclear program as well as other issues.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I would like to ask Professor Roth what he thinks of any possible link between the end of the Iran-Israel war and a revival of peace efforts in the Middle East. After the break.
Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most. And make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493. With more than 30,000 successful in vitro fertilizations, IVF Michigan is now ranked as one of America's best fertility clinics according to Newsweek magazine. IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders in high-quality fertility care. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 9 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. A founding member, American board-certified Dr. Nicholas Shama, is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. He has performed over 20,000 successful IVF cases, and it's helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. When it's time to get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at one of America's best fertility clinics, call IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio toll-free at 855-952-9600. 855-952-9600.
A car accident can change your life in an instant. As a result of a car accident, you may become unemployed. As a result of a car accident, you may need a lot of medical treatment. People think that insurance companies are on their side. Why? Because they're giving them 1 or 2 benefits. Are they giving them all the benefits they deserve? How would one know unless you consult with an attorney? Call the law offices of Jumana Kiruz at 248-557-3645. 248-557-3645.
I'm Atif Abdel Gawad. Join me the last Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be exploring key issues and events in the Middle East and the U.S. live on America's Voice of the Arab. Tune in to WNZK 690 a.m. and watch live on the Facebook page of U.S. Arab Radio.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing the prospects of peace between Israel and Iran and related issues. Perhaps one of those issues is, can we think of a possible link between the end of the current war and a revival of peace efforts between Israel and the Palestinians? The question goes to Mr. Dr. Roth.
Thanks. Well, I think that the difficulty is that we will simply snap back to where we were before the strikes began, which was pretty much nowhere. And what has become clear is the willingness of major partners of the United States and other sort of leading voices in Europe to be willing to go along with the grand scheme of Israel's role in Middle East security. It's really been quite remarkable that there's been a very muted criticism of what the Israelis have done, followed by what the Americans have done. The European powers have been very eager to try to find a way of accommodating Donald Trump and all of his unstable whims. And so it's really hard to see any kind of pressure being mobilized against the Israelis to do anything about the situation in Gaza or more broadly the Palestinian question, in spite of the fact that there's increasing embarrassment on the part of European governments about their complicity in what's been going on in Gaza. We've seen a number of major articulations in the international system regarding this situation, not only the provisional measures on several occasions by the International Court of Justice in the Gaza case brought by South Africa, but also an advisory opinion demanding an end to the occupation, essentially with all deliberate speed. Yet international legal norms seem to be less and less relevant to the international politics on this and one might say other questions. The very fact that preventive war is seemingly going to be tolerated in the international system when preventive war was the very thing that the international law of peace and security was created to forestall. Is something that I think really augurs very badly for the future of diplomacy, and particularly diplomacy guided by legal standards, which are basically the main card that Palestinians have to play. The right of Palestinians to self-determination is widely recognized. International institutions have been standing up for international human rights, as say international legal institutions and non-governmental organizations, but governments seem less and less guided by the kinds of considerations that would drive a change in the policies. And meanwhile, as I pointed out, the Israeli government has, for its own internal reasons, little interest in pursuing any serious peace initiatives.
Do you, Professor Roth, do you share the view that peace is really dependent on a creation of a Palestinian state?
Well, I believe that the peace is going to be to depend upon some kind of resolution that allows for the self-determination of both peoples in the territory, whether that take the form of a two-state solution or a one-state solution or some kind of confederation or whatever. The specific mechanisms, I think, are not what are really the crucial elements. What matters is that we not confuse the means and the ends. That Palestinian self-determination ultimately is the key to the resolution. And that will need to be established through processes that one way or other establish the equality of Jews and Arabs in the whole of the territory of Palestine. How that can be made to occur, though, under current circumstances, it's very obscure right now. There are not the dynamics in place that would seem to drive any of the parties toward that kind of resolution, and indeed be hard to find a partner on the Palestinian side in the wake of what's been going on that would be willing to take major political risks to try to engage with an Israeli government that has engaged in the kinds of tactics that have been engaged in the last year and a half.
Professor Aftandilian, what is the likely scenario if the upcoming Iran-U.S. negotiations fail? We go back to military action?
Well, I think that's a distinct possibility, unfortunately, because as I said before, we know that Iran's nuclear capabilities have been degraded, but we don't know the extent of that. And if there is a reconstitution of Iran's nuclear program, which may be likely, then I think the Israelis will try to strike again. And also for political reasons, as Professor Roth said, it may be in Netanyahu's political interests also to do that. So this is why I'm not very optimistic that, there's going to be a peaceful resolution of this whole situation down the road. I think the most optimistic situation would be if there are serious U.S.-Iran nuclear talks and they actually do progress to some type of deal. But if that fails, I think we could find ourselves back in a situation where the Israelis will strike again on the remnants of Iran's nuclear program.
Professor Roth, the war has made a segment of Israeli population feel more insecure, and some Israelis are considering leaving Israel. Do you think that trend will continue, and whether that is true?
I think it's true and it will continue, but it's not going to be significant in the grand scheme of things in terms of changing the dynamics of Israeli politics or changing the fundamental realities of Israeli society. The main problem is that no matter how strong Israel is militarily, it doesn't really change something fundamentally about its vulnerability. And as long as people feel vulnerable, they are likely to support policies which, if they can't make themselves feel more secure, they will at least make themselves feel less impotent. And that's a dynamic that counterproductive political forces around the world have been able to capitalize on with populations that feel threatened. So I think we are looking ahead to a period in Israeli politics where it's not going to be possible in the near term for political leadership to emerge that is going to have a genuinely productive approach to establishing peaceful relations, either regionally or in respect to the Palestinian question.
Professor Aftandilian, let me shift finally to the Gaza situation for a second. How helpful would it be to have a joint project between Israel and Iran as a long-term agreement to provide food to the people who are dying, not only by weapons, but also from hunger?
Excuse me, are you saying there'll be a joint Israeli-Iran project?
Yes, to provide food.
Yeah.
How realistic is that idea?
Yeah, I don't think that's realistic. I don't think the Iranians are going to cooperate with the Israelis in any way. Obviously, the Iranians will try to show political solidarity with the Palestinians of Gaza, but I just don't see any physical cooperation between Israel and Iran at this point.
I mean, sending shipments of food by Iran and Israel allowing the food to reach the hungry Palestinians.
Yeah, well, I mean, Iran has a lot of economic problems itself at this point because of the mismanagement of its own economy and sanctions. So it's hard for me to get my head around the fact that Iran would be sending food to Gaza via Israel. There's just so many complications associated with something like that.
Okay, one final question then, since your answer is no and very brief. Iran hit Qatar to retaliate against the U.S. strikes. Tell me in 30 seconds about the dynamics of Iran-Arab relationships.
Well, the Iranian-Qatar relationship is interesting because they both share a large gas field in the Gulf. So there's strong economic ties between the two countries that neither side wants to upset. Obviously, the Iranians launched those attacks in a symbolic way against the Al Udeid American base in Qatar. But the Qataris, probably with U.S. assistance, were able to intercept those. So right now there's some tensions between Iran and Qatar, but overall I think those tensions will diminish over time, largely because Qatar, not only because of economic reasons, but also political reasons, wants to show that it has ties to various countries. And we see that with Qatar, with Hamas, Qatar, with Israel, and things like that.
Thank you very much, Professor Aftandilian and Professor Roth. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you again the last Friday next month. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.